How do you please fans who are gamers and comic book fans? You combine the two things, and the Marvel vs. Capcom series has proven that formula works great. One of the biggest games in the franchise is Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Fate of Two Worlds. So big, in fact, that we have lots of info about it, and I mean lots. So prepare your team of 3 and your button-mashing fingers because we've got 107 facts about Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Let's get started. The Marvel vs. Capcom franchise started back in 1996 as an arcade game, but back then it was called X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and it later became available on the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation. Before that, Capcom had fighting games using the Marvel Universe only, its first two being X-Men Children of the Atom, released in 1994, and Marvel Superheroes, released in 1995. 15 years after the original game, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Fate of Two Worlds was released as, surprise surprise, the third main entry in the fighting series developed by Capcom and Aiding. It's the 5th installment in the overall franchise. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was released on February 15th, 2011 in the US and combines characters from the Marvel world and characters from the Capcom games, as the name implies. The trailer for the game was uploaded on Christmas Eve in 2010. It was a stylized trailer that showcased the characters that would be playable in the game. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was the first game in the series to be released after the Walt Disney Company bought Marvel in 2009. Not only that, but the game was also the second in the Versus series to use 3D graphics on 2D battlegrounds. The first was Tatsunoko vs. Capcom in 2008. This makes sense because Marvel vs. Capcom was directed by Ryota Nitsuma, whose credits include Tatsunoko vs. Capcom Ultimate All-Stars, so he obviously knew what he was doing. The plot of the game meant to revolve around Dr. Doom and Albert Wesker putting together a team of villains that are powerful enough to destroy both the Capcom and Marvel universes. Not willing to let that slide, the heroes come to the rescue. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 might not have happened at all. After Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was released in 2000, Marvel and Capcom had to split because the latter lost its Marvel license. Marvel then worked with EA to create Marvel Nemesis: Rise of the Imperfects, while Capcom continued to work on crossover games. It wasn't until 2008 that fan demand for Marvel vs. Capcom games became so strong that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was re-released for the Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network, followed by the debut of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 3 years later. Over the years, Capcom noticed the growing appeal of the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise to people outside of the gaming world. Even non-gamers were playing. So they kept that in mind and made the controls easier for new gamers with each release. The original of the 3 games had 6 possible buttons: light, medium, and hard for both punches and kicks. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 cut it down to 4 buttons, just light and hard, and Marvel vs. Capcom 3 created a simple mode that uses 3 main buttons for basic attacks, special combos, and hyper combos, making the fancy moves easier to achieve just by smashing those buttons over and over. Sadly, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 only has 38 playable characters, 2 of which were DLC fighters, unlike the 56 in the previous game. But old favorites made a comeback, and new characters were included on both Marvel and Capcom's rosters. Are we listing them? Alright, we're listing them, here we go. On the Marvel side, returning characters were Captain America, Doctor Doom, Hulk, Iron Man, Magneto, Sentinel, Shuma-Gorath, Spider-Man, Storm, and Wolverine. Marvel characters that debuted in this game were Deadpool, Dormammu, MODOK, Phoenix, She-Hulk, Super-Skrull, Taskmaster, Thor, and X-23. From Capcom, Akuma, Chun-Li, Felicia, Morrigan Ainsland, Jill Valentine, Ryu, and Tron Bonne made reappearances. So then who's new in the crew? They're Amaterasu, Albert Wesker, Arthur Crimson Viper, Chris Redfield, Dante, Sienko, Mike Hagar, Nathan Rad Spencer, Trish, Beautiful Joe, and Zero. Though the roster has changed with each game, there is one character who's been there the entire time: Wolverine. Makes sense, since he is one of the most popular Marvel fighters in the comics, movies, TV shows, and video games. Before Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was even announced or being developed, some April Fool's jokes were played that teased the existence of the game. Screenshots of the fake game were released online, causing big speculation among fans as to whether or not they were real. Originally, the story for the game was planned to be written by comic book writer Frank Thierry, the news of which Capcom announced July 22nd, 2010 at E3. Who is Frank Thierry? He's done work with both Marvel and DC and has handled the writing for many of the characters in the Marvel universe. The most notable hero he's worked on is Wolverine, who he worked on for 3 years. With Frank Thierry's many impressive titles under his belt, it's no wonder he was chosen to pen Marvel vs. Capcom 3. The characters he enjoyed writing about the most in the game were Wolverine and Deadpool, without a doubt. Thierry said that Wolverine was, quote, really the character that launched my career. He knows the character so well that he could write Wolverine's dialogue in his sleep. As for Deadpool, Thierry said, quote, "He's just so damn fun to write for. I really think he's going to be the game's breakout character." Knowing how popular Deadpool is for his unfiltered sense of humor, Thierry makes a valid point, and Deadpool's pretty popular these days, so it sounds like he was onto something. Thierry got the job after Marvel's director of games at the time, TQ Jefferson, contacted him on Facebook to ask if the writer would be interested in working on Marvel vs. Capcom 3. This was a year after Thierry had met TQ at New York Comic-Con. What's this? A social network being used for networking? What is this sorcery? Thierry needed to do research on the Capcom characters as he was less familiar with them compared to the Marvel characters he had written about before. To do the Capcom characters justice, he played games that Capcom sent him for research so that he would know how to write the characters. Game creator Niitsuma initially announced that the game would have a fleshed-out single-player story mode with special endings for each character, CG animated cutscenes with full voiceovers, and the ability for characters to meet and interact with other characters. Marvel said that the game would also center around fan service. They announced plans to cooperate with Capcom in adding events mid-battle between their characters that would make references to Marvel Comics storylines. In the end, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 didn't have a story mode, or the special features and events that had been originally announced. What happened? Anything that would tell the story of the game was limited to the opening movies and character endings in arcade mode. There were short movies that players could unlock in the game, but they were actually videos that had already been released about the game, not new content exclusive to those who had the game. Marvel still wanted to make fans happy, however. True to their word, you can find references to Marvel storylines in the game. For instance, if Captain America defeats Iron Man in battle, he will say, "Just like Civil War." Ouch. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 had a CG animated trailer that introduced the playable characters and villains. It's quite stunning and fun to watch. The full version is almost 11 minutes long. The game had 10 battle stages, each of course taken from either the Marvel Universe or Capcom games. They are Asgard, Danger Room, Demon Village, Fate of the Earth, Hand Hideout, Catlock's Island, Metro City, Shield Hellcarrier, The Daily Bugle, and Tricell Laboratory. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 has 3 modes: Arcade, Training, and Mission. Arcade mode is vital in unlocking content and segments of the plot. Over the course of the game, players could accumulate what are called player points. The easiest way to do this was by playing on Arcade mode and online. Player points could be used to unlock characters and all 9 PP license card titles. Unlocking all 9 PP license card titles required 100,000 points. That's a lot. As for the unlockable characters, Akuma, Sienko, Sentinel, and Taskmaster, acquiring all 4 requires a total of 8,000 points. Did you try this? Some of the characters can be seen in alternate models, namely Arthur, Dante, and Phoenix. Once you're in Model Viewer, press Select to switch to different models of the characters. If you want alternate colors, simply press X. Battles in Marvel vs. Capcom are 3 vs. 3. Normally you begin as the first character, but if you press and hold the Partner 1 button during the versus or loading screen, you'll begin the battle as your second character. Alternatively, you can press and hold the Partner 2 button to fight as your third character. Here's another tidbit. If you want to switch your assist characters, you only need to hold the Partner 1 and Partner 2 buttons before a battle starts. Not sure why you'd want to do that, but it's pretty cool that you can. The song I Want to Take You for a Ride from Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was brought back for Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and remixed, and it's just as catchy as ever. Arcade mode consists of battling through 6 teams before coming face to face with the final boss Galactus and his minions. Depending on the difficulty setting, arcade mode could be completed within 15 minutes and was meant to be replayed multiple times. The character endings had non-playable characters from the Marvel and Capcom universes make cameos. They included Nightcrawler, Kingpin, Mega Man, Nick Fury, and Master Mold, just to name a few. In mission mode, each character has 10 unique missions that teach players how to use the character's simple and complex skills. The missions can range from something as simple as using a special move successfully to using multiple combos. Training mode is pretty self-explanatory. It gives players a segue to experimenting with each of the characters in different situations. This mode is pretty neat because you can customize the battle situation to match your preferences. In other words, you can do whatever you want with whoever you want. If you really want a challenge, however, you can always turn to online mode and pit your skills against someone else's. There are ranked battles, unranked battles, and you can also have a lobby where up to 8 players can join in a tournament-style battle. At the 2011 San Diego Comic-Con, it was announced that there would be an extended version of Marvel vs. Capcom 3. It added 12 new characters, increasing the roster from 38 to 50. This extended version, called Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, included all previous DLC and a copy of Marvel vs. Capcom official complete works. The high-definition graphics also made the game look more polished. The game was released on Steam in December of 2016 with a very positive rating. The Steam version has 47 achievements that you can collect, so you better get to battling if you're missing some. The game comes with 6 language options: English, Japanese, Spanish, French, Italian, and German. Take your pick. They also offer subtitles for each language. In addition to 12 new fighters, Ultimate also added 9 new stages: Shadowland, Bon Wonderland, Shield Air Show, Chaos at Tricell, Danger Room, Asgard Sea of Space, City That Never Sleeps, Days of Future Past, and Demon Village Redux. Shadowland is a new version of the Hand Hideout stage from the previous game. It's based off the 2010 Marvel Comics event Shadowland, where Daredevil creates Shadowland after becoming the new leader of the Hand Ninja Clan. Bon Wonderland is a new version of the previous Catlock's Island stage with a winter theme and Servbots creating snowmen outdoors. Chaos at Tricell is the Tricell laboratory under siege by the BOWs who have escaped containment. They make quite a mess, but you can see many items from Resident Evil in the background. Demon Village Redux is a black and white version of the Demon Village stage from the past, as an homage to the Game Boy game Gargoyle's Quest. 3 new modes were added to Ultimate: Spectator Mode, Galactus Mode, and Heroes and Heralds Mode. Spectator Mode allows up to 6 players to watch a fight. Galactus Mode lets you play as the final boss Galactus from Arcade Mode. Heroes and Heralds Mode was part of a DLC that allowed players to strengthen their characters with 3 cards out of 100. These cards gave characters different attributes such as parrying, dizzying attacks, and X-Factor blowback. Did you know? If you look at the character screen in Ultimate, you'll find the original game's title, Marvel vs. Capcom 3: Fate of Two Worlds, near the bottom of the screen. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was re-released December 2016 on the PS4 in the US, but Australia didn't get the game until February 2017. Why? Australia's classification board delayed the game's release so minor changes could be made to the parental settings in order for them to give it a younger rating. It was originally rated M, and Capcom wanted it to be 15+. Fans got their hopes up when rumors went around that a special Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3X edition was going to be released. It was said that there would be 8 more fighters and that the game would be a re-release of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, as that game was a re-release of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 in itself. The rumor was shot down when Capcom's Seth Killian, Christian Svensson, and other representatives stated that the rumors were false. Ultimate's default box art was drawn by Capcom illustrator Shinkiro, who had also drawn the box art for Tatsunoko vs. Capcom and the King of Fighters 94 through 2000. The box art was reversible, pretty darn cool. Shinkiro did one side of the box while the other side showcased comic book style art by Mark Brooks, who had worked on Marvel comics like Ultimate X-Men, The Amazing Spider-Man, Avengers The Initiative, and more. Wonder why Capcom couldn't keep their promise on the special features for Marvel vs. Capcom 3? It was most likely due to the Marvel license, which had always been a tricky area. Capcom lost the rights to Marvel after Marvel vs. Capcom 2, then got it back in 2010 and made the 3rd main installment, then lost it again because Disney, who purchased Marvel in 2009, wanted to use the Marvel characters for their Disney Infinity series. Once the Disney Infinity project was discontinued, Disney sold the rights back to Capcom in 2016. After the 3rd main installment was released and Capcom lost their Marvel license again, the Marvel vs. Capcom games, as well as the DLCs, were removed from Microsoft and Sony's online stores. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 had both English and Japanese voice acting, but only Capcom characters had both languages available. Marvel characters could only speak in English. When Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was being developed, there were plans to have both Marvel and Capcom characters have English and Japanese voices. However, Niitsuma decided it was a bad idea, stating that having Marvel characters speaking in Japanese did not fit with their image. Ultimate took the same stance that Marvel vs. Capcom 3 did to voice acting. Marvel characters only had an English voice option, while Capcom characters had both English and Japanese voice acting. Original characters had been introduced in the previous Marvel vs. Capcom games, and while they were not playable in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, they did make cameos in the background. These characters are Amingo and Ruby Heart. Amingo was a humanoid barrel cactus that could summon other cacti, while Ruby Heart was a French pirate who used ship-related objects as weapons. Magneto's royal DLC outfit resembled Spain's King Juan Carlos's uniform, so closely that even the red sash and buttons matched. The outfit was meant to take after the royal outfit from the 2005 miniseries House of M, however, it turned out that House of M had copied King Juan Carlos's uniform. Spain was not happy with Magneto's outfit, and Marvel vs. Capcom 3 caused a stir with the controversy. In the end, Spain's government asked to have the uniform taken out of the game under the charges of copyright and misuse of the image of the king. Speaking of controversy, this next fact was definitely also one. In Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Nova was shown as Richard Rider, who was in the Marvel comics since about 1976. However, a DLC had an alternate Nova outfit that players weren't supposed to know about yet. And uh-oh. It turned out that Nova's DLC costume was for Sam Alexander, a new Marvel character that would later become Nova. At the time the DLC was released, Sam hadn't formally been introduced to the comics yet. Capcom had gotten ahead of themselves. Liked the artwork in the Marvel vs. Capcom series? Capcom released an art book in 2012 titled Marvel vs. Capcom Official Complete Works. The 200 pages showed original artwork for Marvel vs. Capcom as well as Children of the Atom and The Punisher. The announcer for Marvel vs. Capcom 3 makes references to previous games. Some are pre-battle announcements. For example, one of the things he says is "Live and let die, fight." This is a nod to Capcom vs. SNK 2. Other references he makes include one towards Street Fighter Alpha 3 where he says, "Go for broke, fight!" and a reference to the song "I'm Gonna Take You for a Ride" in one of his speeches when he says, "Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is here, I'm gonna take you for a wild ride." When fans delved into the game's code for Marvel vs. Capcom 3, they found what appeared to be traces of Dr. Otto Octavius, better known as Dr. Octopus from the Marvel comics. Though there wasn't much done for him, as there was no art, models, textures, or audio for him. When it was announced that Amaterasu from Capcom's Okami games would be joining the Marvel vs. Capcom family, it was also planned that one of the battle stages in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 would take after Okami with similar visuals. However, the designers decided to scrap the idea as they thought the drastic visual change wouldn't fit well with the style of the rest of the game. But if you really want to, you can find the data for the Okami stage on the game disc. Too bad, an Okami stage would have looked amazing. The fact that Deadpool was going to be in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 didn't really surprise anyone. You see, Deadpool himself predicted that he would be in the game. Sort of. In issue number 27 of the Deadpool comics, he mentions Street Fighter to Kitty Pryde from the X-Men. Before Kitty gets a chance to respond, Deadpool lands a hit, yelling, "Shoryuken!" Frank West from the Dead Rising games made an appearance in Ultimate, but he was actually supposed to have come out in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. He got as far as being programmed into the game, but had to be taken out because for some reason, whenever Frank was in a battle, the game had strange lag issues. Thankfully, this problem was fixed for Ultimate. Marvel had come a long way as a company since the long ago of the development of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. With Marvel releasing hit movies left and right, they became very particular about which of their characters would be in the Marvel vs. Capcom 3 expansion and how they would be portrayed. An example of this can be seen with Doctor Strange. The Sorcerer Supreme wasn't originally planned to be in Ultimate, but Marvel pushed to have him included in the roster. Other than having Doctor Strange in the game, Capcom had no other control over him. Marvel took over the planning for everything, from his dialogue to his special attacks to his hand movements. Although Iron Man is very popular, his first appearance in the Marvel vs. Capcom games wasn't until Fate of Two Worlds. Capcom wanted to use Iron Man from the very beginning in previous games, but Marvel never gave them permission. Instead, Capcom had used Iron Man's best friend, War Machine. If you pay close attention, you'll recognize Iron Man's theme song as a remixed, faster version of War Machine's theme from the first Marvel vs. Capcom games. In Ultimate, there's a poster in the background of the Days of Future Past stage that pays tribute to the cover of the Uncanny X-Men issue number 141 from 1981. That poster in the game shows characters from Marvel vs. Capcom 2 who didn't make it into 3. They have labels over their faces saying things like slain or apprehended. However, there is one person whose face is not covered, and that's Mega Man. This is perhaps a hint of his cameo in the game and the DLC of his costume that later became available. That poster also included Cyclops, Colossus, Captain Commando, Ruby Heart, Hayato, Iceman, and more. Which one do you wish would come back, or at least make a cameo? Phoenix Wright's level 3 hyper combo had a little typo. In the game, Wright yells, "Take this!" when he deals the final blow, but his speech bubble said the classic "take that" instead. This was corrected in the Heroes and Heralds patch. Nemesis was supposed to be in Fate of Two Worlds, but was taken out because the developers deemed him too gruesome and didn't want the rating of their game to be affected. However, it seems like the developers really wanted Nemesis to be in the game because they tweaked his animation so that he could be in a T-rated game. Niitsuma revealed that Marvel character Blade was considered for Fate of Two Worlds, but didn't include him because the developers didn't want too many characters that fought with swords. Dante's appearance and moveset in Ultimate were taken from his portrayal in Devil May Cry 3: Dante's Awakening. The only moves that were different were $1 Million, Devil Must Die, Bold Move, and Weasel Shot. Deadpool makes many references in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, including characters like Betty Boop. Before he starts his level 3 hyper combo, Deadpool strikes a Betty Boop pose and says boop boop be doop. If Deadpool is in your party and goes up against Spider-Man in Ultimate, he will say, "Gonna rough you up like a Broadway musical." This is a reference to the Spider-Man musical, which became infamous for the serious injuries that the actors playing Spider-Man sustained after they fell from the unstable stunt ropes in the musical. If you have him dressed as Cable Pool, he will say, "And you thought Cable wasn't in this game." This is a reference to Cable being a playable character in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but not in 3. If you have Wolverine as the first fighter in your party and go up against Frank West, he will say, "Me and guys named Frank don't get along well." This is a reference to Frank Castle, otherwise known as the Punisher, who Wolverine has disliked for a very long time. Sentinel's character bio in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 states that his serial number is COTA 94. This is a reference to the name and year that the first Capcom fighting game with X-Men characters characters was released. The game, of course, is Children of the Atom, which came out in 1994. Super Skrull was originally supposed to be the Human Torch. His appearance in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was the closest that Capcom ever got to having the Fantastic Four in a Marvel vs. Capcom game. Why change the Human Torch? It turned out that his fire animations took up too much memory, so Capcom decided to turn the fire hero into Super Skrull. It made sense because the development team had already completed Human Torch's character model and movements. You can see a certain board in the background during Ryu's ending when he's fighting Iron Fist. The board shows an upcoming match for Ken vs. Mr. X, which could be referencing either Mr. X from the Marvel Universe or Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. If you play on the Catalox Island stage as Tronbon and Tron dies, you can hear her brother Teasel crying. Guess they just wanted to make it realistic and make you feel really bad just for playing the game. World Championships can get you more than just bragging rights. After defeating Magneto, Deadpool says, "I just beat Mag-freaking-Nito! Where's your curly mustache at?" This is a shout out to Michael Yipes Mendoza, the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 World Champion, who said the same thing in his gameplay video. Okay, well they may have cleaned up one word. Magneto's black and blue color scheme was also a reference to Mendoza, who wore black pants and a blue shirt during that same tournament. Look at this game with its double shoutouts. We all see what you're doing. The Evolution Championship Series, or EVO for short, is the world's largest fighting game tournament. It's also known that Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is very popular amongst players there, as Ultimate remained one of the games played in the 2017 tournament. Capcom games are always focused on detail, but they made one little mistake in Chris Redfield's ending. It shows Chris putting Albert Wesker on trial with Matthew Murdock, aka Daredevil, prosecuting it. This is incorrect because in the Marvel comics, Matthew Murdock is a defense attorney and not a prosecutor. Ultimate had physical copies made available for modern consoles like the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. These copies had updated cover art and an exclusive comic penned by Marvel artists Sean Chen and Gerardo Sandoval. Chen entered the comic book project not knowing all of the characters in the game. He of course knew all of the Marvel characters, but there were some Capcom characters that he was unfamiliar with. Working on the comic turned him into a Capcom fan. Sandoval did a lot of research and asked his son and his friends about the Capcom characters so that he could get them just right. One of the challenges was integrating the art styles right, as some Capcom characters look realistic and others look cartoony. The latest installment, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, will be released in September 2017. Though it was initially rumored to not include any X-Men characters, an online leak in a GameFAQs forum in April of 2017 showed the inclusion of X-Men in the roster. However, nothing is confirmed by Capcom yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. One new character pair that the last game did not have is rumored to be Guardians of the Galaxy's Rocket Raccoon and Groot. Pretty likely, since a line of comic variant covers is coming out in August of 2017, with a couple of them being Guardians related. Many believe the potential for no X-Men is due to licensing issues with Fox, since Fox and Disney have a long-time beef and Disney owns Marvel. Fox doesn't allow X-Men to appear in the Marvel movies, and they even once sued Marvel over the use of the word mutants in one of Marvel's TV shows. Thanks for watching 107 Facts about Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Have you played it? Who's the best character? Who's your main? Comment below and let us know. Don't forget to click the little bell icon to become part of our notification squad, and if you like getting more from your games, subscribe to the Leaderboard, where we help you game smarter.